first thing I want to talk about is body language. Now, I'm sure you guys have studied a lot, and I know I have, I know most of you have, but as much as you've studied, it doesn't matter what you say for words, but it's how you say it is what makes it powerful. 7% is words, 38% is our vocal elements, and 55% is our nonverbal body language. That means 93% of our language has nothing to do with the words that we say. Maya Angelou once said, "I've learned that it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what you do, what matters is how you make people feel." So you can see how body language is critical. When we create rapport, one way we do it is through mirroring the other person that we're talking to. What mirroring is when you're talking to another person, you can actually see it if you're at work or if you're out, for example, at a bar or a restaurant. When two people are in complete rapport with each other, they actually start to have the same gestures. Okay, and that's called mirroring. And that's actually a critical tool that we can use when we first start talking to someone in outreach. What you want to do is mirror their positive gestures and not mirror their negative gestures. And I'm going to teach you what some of those gestures are in a second. So Tony Robbins, I watched one of his talks the other day, and what he said was great. He said, people like people who are like them, and people like people who are like they want to be. So people are like people who are like them. So how is the first way we can build rapport? Well, we can build it through trust. Why? 2 reasons. Because people want to talk to you if they can trust that they can tell you what they think and what they feel, and you're not going to attack them. They want to know that they can have this conversation that flows and not worry about saying something and you're going to go off on them. And also people want to trust you because if you're having that conversation with them and you show that they can trust you, and not everybody is body language experts, but we have intuition. So we know when somebody could be not be so open with us. Anyways, you want to use certain body language consciously that shows that what you're saying is credible. So, lying and being honest. There are some conscious things that we can do to show that they can trust us and to show that what we're saying is credible. The first one, as you might imagine, is eye contact. So there's a couple different types of eye contact. There's social gazing, which is what we want to use today. That's when, if you can imagine between the eyes and the mouth, imagine like a triangle. And that's where you want to be looking when you talk to people. Then there's power gazing, which we want to stay away from. That's when the triangle gets a little shorter and you're kind of looking at them too long and too deep. And it makes them feel uncomfortable and it comes off like you're trying to be dominant. And then there's intimate gazing, where the triangle starts to become bigger, and we're not doing that today because it's not that type of demonstration. Okay, so another thing you can do is, actually, let me just see something. By a show of hands, how many of you have felt like you have been lied to or have been in a situation where the person was lying to you before? See, that's my point. Almost every one of you. You can tell whether you're actually reading their body language or you just feel that intuition. You can tell when somebody's not being completely honest. All right, so here's another way you can tell if somebody's not being honest with you, and another way you can, or something that you can prevent yourself from doing so you can come off as trustworthy. Try not to scratch your nose a lot. Why? Because when you're lying, and when somebody else is lying, their blood rushes. And the blood comes to the tip of your nose and it makes you want to scratch it. So often liars will scratch their nose a lot when they're talking to you. Another thing that people that are lying will do is, just like when we were a kid, what did we do as a kid when we lied? Right? Like the child just realized, oh, something just came out of my mouth, I shouldn't have just said that. And we do the same thing as adults, but we do it in a little bit more mature of a way, a sneaky little way. We put our hand like this and we put our fingers over our mouth, or we put our fingers over our mouth on here, like this. So if you're talking to someone and they're kind of covering their mouth a little bit when they talk to you and they're not making very good eye contact with you and they're scratching their nose every once in a while and maybe their hand is kind of hidden, they're lying to you. And I'm not trying to teach you how to catch your husband or your wife lying. I'm just trying to teach you how to be good in outreach. So another thing that you can do is keep your arms open. Palm language is something that politicians know very well. And your open palms say, you can connect with me, you can trust me, what I have to say, I'm being completely open about. You can question anything. You see this a lot if you Google Jesus. A lot of depictions of Jesus show his palms out like this. Or think about the court of law. They have you put your hands out, they have you put your hand up and say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God, right? So you have to kind of be conscious of where your palms are. So if you're talking like this a lot, or if you have your hands in your pockets, or your hands behind your back, it could subconsciously come off like you're hiding something. Again, these are little things we can think about so we come off as credible when we're talking to people. Okay, so now we can move forward to how to try to keep the conversation calm and try to diffuse any emotions that come up. And I'm sure you all know that emotions come up. So one thing that we can do is, and I used to be really guilty of this, I've been trying to work on it, and I'm sure some of you do it, is cross your arms, right? People cross their arms when they just want to be comfortable. They cross their arms in a lot of different situations. Studies show that when a person is giving a speech, if they cross their arms, they're 40% less likely to be well received. Another thing is, if you cross your arms, it's actually a subconscious way of protecting your chest and your heart from attack. And it's a negative gesture. So when we express a negative gesture, it actually has the same effect on us. So if you're doing a negative gesture like crossing your arms, you're actually more likely to feel a little bit more negative. So if you open your arms back up, then you're actually more likely to feel positive. And especially, I'm going to talk about it in a second, but if you're smiling every once in a while, smiling makes you feel more positive and makes them feel more positive. So another thing you can do is tone of voice. Work on your tone of voice. So here's something interesting, and this applies to how to keep it positive too. If they're a fast talker, we're in Massachusetts, people are going to talk a little bit fast. If they're a fast talker, talk at their pace. Because if you're talking really slow and they're talking fast, they're going to get annoyed. And also, they can relate to you if you talk like they talk. They go, oh, this person's like me. If they talk slow, then talk a little bit slower with them. But if they talk loud, they have their hands out, you can tell they're totally engaged with you. You can talk a little bit louder so they can relate to you. But if you can tell that it's getting a little emotional, use clues. If you can tell it's getting emotional, it could be them being a little bit aggressive with you. That's when you don't want to talk louder. In fact, you would want to take a deep breath and stay calm, because the mirror neurons go off and it will make them feel like they can be a little bit more calm with you. All right, so how do we keep it positive? As I'm sure you can imagine, a great way to keep it positive is smiling. Those mirror neurons go off, they're more likely to smile back at you. So interestingly enough, just a cool fact, when people are genuinely smiling, they smile with their eyes. You can't fake smiling with their eyes, so their crow wrinkles come up. But we can force a smile, and we do that with simply our cheek muscles. But it's okay if you have to force a smile in the conversation, because like I said, it will make you feel more positive and it will make them more likely to smile. So people like people who are like them and like people who they want to be like. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that people want role models that are very confident, that stand up straight, that they can look at and they could see themselves as a leader just like them. What are a couple ways that we can come off as a leader? Stand nice and tall, shoulders back, tuck your stomach in a little bit. That's good posture. Be confident about what you're saying. You guys have done so much studying, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of facts and statistics that you've learned, plus you've learned how to talk to people. Don't use filler words like and so, and sound like you're like kind of off, like you kind of don't know what you're saying, like you're just kind of grasping at straws. You come off more confident if you just go, screw it, and you just say what you have to think and say what you have to say and be confident that you know what you're saying. So another thing we can do is, what does your heart tell you? So this video footage that we have is graphic, and we're vegan, and still to this day, I'm sure for most of you, it really hurts to watch it. So one thing you can do when you're watching it is put your hand on your heart and say, it still to this day hurts me to watch it too. And it opens them to feel more comfortable being emotional with you. Okay, this one's a cool one. So, and this is another thing I learned from Tony Robbins. He said, pay attention a little bit to their gestures, because if you make a similar gesture to what they make, they go, oh, a friend. So like in his example, he said, imagine somebody who's talking to you and they're trying to give you a point, and when they give you a point, they're like, and then we can do this. If you do that back and you're like, yeah, but what if we do this? They're gonna be like, oh, a friend. They're like me, they're smart. They know what they're saying, right? So, little tidbit that's cool too is if you want to see if the person you're talking to is interested in what you have to say and is still there with you, look at their feet. When you talk to somebody and you totally engage with them, your feet will be pointed towards them. But if you look down and their feet are pointed totally away from you, one of two things are going on. Their feet are pointed toward the most attractive person in the group, and still their mind is not on you. Or their feet is pointed towards leaving, and that's their way of saying, subconsciously, I want to get the hell out of this conversation. A couple things you can do in that situation. You can either close and consciously and strategically close so that it's memorable for them, and I'll talk about that in the next section. Or you can think about what you guys talked about and something that it sounded like they were interested in, and bring that back up and see if they'd be interested in talking about it. And if they like start asking questions and get more intrigued, you're good as gold. So how do we close? I personally think a great way to close is a good handshake. So a good handshake is when you take their hand, put your full hand in their hands, hold their hand firmly but not too firm. And because if you hold it too firm, then that's called a vice handshake, and it comes off like you're being dominant. And if you hold it even firmer, that's called a bone crusher, and they're white, their knuckles are turning white, and like that's saying I'm trying to be really dominant, and most likely you just had an argument. So, and also you don't want to grab their hand like this, because it doesn't come off as professional, and you don't want to give them the fish out of water handshake like this. Like, it doesn't come off quite as professional. But if you shake their hands, you look them in the eye and you say, thank you very much for being here with me today and for having this conversation, I think it shows that you respect them. I just read this book called A Guide to Rational Living, and it's by this man named Albert Ellis. And one of the main messages in the book was, it's illogical to think that someone is a bad person. You can't, this is for all of you guys too, if you've ever done something wrong and wondered if you're a bad person, it's illogical. You would have to be a bad person when you wake up, when you go to bed, when you go out to lunch, when you brush your teeth. You'd have to be a bad person in literally everything you do, every second of the day, every month, every year. It's illogical. People can do bad things. They have bad actions. And no matter what you do, you're not a bad person. And that's the message that we want to get across, is when we talk to these people, how often do you get like, I know I've gotten it personally before when they're like, oh, you think I'm such a bad person, right? Because this is something that they've been doing their entire life, right? And so they think that you're attacking who they are fundamentally as a person. But I think that solid handshake says, I respect you. I see you as a person. I respect you as an individual. Clearly in this conversation, I'm telling you that I don't respect some of your actions, but in this handshake, I want you to know that I respect you. So, does anybody have any questions about body language, or does anybody have something else that they know that they'd like to add? All right, so I'm going to hand it off to my wife to talk about the 5 pillars of outreach.
Okay, hello everyone. I am going to talk about the 5 pillars we want to be aware of when we're doing outreach. So the first one is ask. We have open-ended questions and close-ended questions. So close-ended are the ones that have a yes or no answer, and open-ended are the ones that we actually want to stick to when we're doing outreach. We want to make people stop for a second, think about what they're saying, and elaborate on their answer. So Kate's actually going to talk about Socratic questioning later in the workshop. She's going to give you examples of questions you might want to ask, or explain how to turn a statement into a question. We want to ask questions that make people think and question their own beliefs without us actually telling them what to do, because people don't like when we tell them what to do. The next one is listen. So listen is actually as simple as it sounds. When we ask a question, we want to be aware of what they're saying. We want to pinpoint their trigger points, we want to pinpoint their needs, and so that way we can craft a solution to that specific bystander. The next one is understand. So understand is, it goes beyond only understanding their words and what they're saying to us. We want to put ourselves in their position, empathize with them. We want to say me too. So we know what they're going through and we know that they think that way because they were raised that way and we're trying to teach them something different. So I'm actually going to talk more about that when I talk about connecting with people. The next one is educate. So once we have all their answers and we know what their needs are and what triggers them, then we can find strategic ways to give information to that bystander. So actually I was having a conversation last week, I think, with a customer at the bar I work at. And he was saying, well, if we stop eating animals, then they're all going to conspire against us. And we are all going to be like human slaves because we're going to have so many animals. And like, that's ridiculous, but I wasn't going to say that. So I explained to him how we breed animals into life, and if less people are eating animal products, less animals are going to be bred. So we are actually not going to have a conspiration, and we're all going to be enslaved. The next one is inspire. So once you give them all the information they need, once you give them facts and try to teach them why veganism is the answer, then we want to motivate them. And if you feel like when you're talking to this person, they are actually interested in what you're saying, then you can suggest they watch a documentary or read a book or research. We have AB cards and they have a lot of resources in there. You can suggest Challenge 22. They get chefs and experienced vegans that can help them through their journey. I actually was watching a video with Paul Bashir, and he explained how outreach is almost like sales. We're not selling anything, but we're trying to convince these people that they need to change their mind. So one technique you can use is the "that's not all" technique. So I want you to think for a minute all the infomercials you've ever watched. They give you this product and they tell you it's the greatest thing ever and you really, really need to buy this product. So they tell you, we have this vacuum and this vacuum is $29.99. But if you order now, then we give you this brush and you can brush around your house with your new vacuum and your brush. But before you change the channel, we also have these filters for $29.99 included in there. So you never have to wash your filter. And if you call in the next 3 seconds, and then we're gonna give you your own dirty rug so you can vacuum with your new vacuum. And this actually works, and you can use it with veganism. If you tell a person, look, if you go vegan, you are going to help about 200 animals that are not even gonna be bred into life to be killed. But you also can help the environment. Did you know that animal agriculture is the leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions in the world? But if that's not enough for that person, then they can help themselves. Humans are selfish, and if you tell them they can help themselves, then that will make it. You can tell them with a healthy plant-based diet, vegan diet, you can reverse or stop the leading causes of death in Americans, like cancer and heart disease and diabetes, just to name a few. So I think that's a really good way we can engage with people and show them that it's not, even though it is about the animals, it's not all there is to veganism. So now I'm going to pass it on to Kate. If does anyone have any questions? She's
Okay.
going to talk about the traffic light subject.
Okay, so if anybody has read the AV manual, one thing they go through is traffic light subjects. So we have subjects that we want to stay away from, and we have subjects that we can talk about a little bit, and a subject that we really want to use as the go-ahead. So the subjects that we want to stay away from are baby steps, hypothetical situations, and vegetarianism. So as vegans, you guys are well aware of the dairy and the egg industry. So one thing that you can do, especially if you're talking to a vegetarian, is tell them a little bit about the dairy and the egg industry. But as we're going to talk about in the green light, yes, horrible things go on in those industries, but the thing is, no animal should be exploited, period. That's the point. So baby steps are for babies. As Gary Francione, I know that it's a little bit controversial in AV, but he does say some amazing things. As Gary Francione says, if somebody wants to take baby steps, tell them, okay, don't tell me, I'm about to be a little bitchy. Tell them, okay, you can have a vegan breakfast for a week, and then you can have a vegan breakfast and a vegan lunch for a week, and then after 2 weeks, when you realize you haven't died yet, you can try a vegan dinner every day for a week, and then you can just go vegan. And then hypothetical situations, just do your best to stay away from. Actually, I have people at my work that keep bringing up hypothetical situations, and they're ridiculous. We will never be on an island with a chicken. I'll say probably we'll never be on an island with a chicken alone and die because we don't want to eat him and we make friends with him. Anyway, so, all right, the yellow light subjects. The yellow light subjects are a little bit surprising. They include health, the environment, and the treatment of animals. I know that might be a little bit of a surprise. So with health, people who are fitness fanatics definitely are going to want to know the health benefits of veganism, and of course, the average person wants to know too. So you could say something like, in fact, I just watched this YouTube video by Dr. Michael Greger called Uprooting the Leading Causes of Diseases. He also has a book called How Not to Die, and it's amazing. So he's the creator of nutrition.org. He made this book and it became a New York bestseller. And he gave all the proceeds to charity. And basically what the book is about is that if you have a healthy plant-based diet, you can actually prevent, and in some case, I will say mostly prevent, and of course there's some environmental aspects, but you have control over preventing and reversing the top 14 reasons Americans die. He even includes a 15th reason, which is that a lot of the medications that we have Americans use ended up killing those Americans. So what about environment? You could say something along, first of all, it seems like everybody we talk to as a vegan suddenly becomes an environmentalist, right? They never cared before. Anyways, if you want to say something, you could say like 67% of deforestation in the world is caused by animal agriculture. 90% of the deforestation in the Amazon rainforest, animal agriculture. 56 to 58% of greenhouse gases, animal agriculture, while only producing 37% of our protein and 18% of our calories. And then treatment of animals, we have the videos on hand so they can see for themselves what these animals go through. And if you really want to talk about something, you could bring it down to a personal story. So instead of talking about the cows and talking about the chickens, you can bring it down to the dairy cow and tell the story of how the dairy cow is raped over and over again in order to be impregnated and have a baby, because that's how they produce the most milk. And that can be really resonating with a lot of people. And the green light is veganism as a moral imperative. The green light says no animal should be exploited. Gary Francione makes another good point. He says you could have a slave and you could beat that slave 8 times instead of 10 times, and that slave will probably appreciate that, but that's not the point. Slavery is still fundamentally immoral. And that's the point here, is that there's no such thing as humane killing, and we all know that. And in fact, the animal industry, the animal movement, the vegan movement was primarily about humane welfare and what's called single issue campaigns. And these were very destructive to veganism, and this has been the ongoing message. In fact, the founding person of animal welfare, Peter Singer, actually believed that it's okay to kill animals because they have no sense of future or past, so they don't know they want to die, as long as it's done properly. This is a message we want to abolish. We all know that If we're going to go ahead and say humans have the fundamental right to not be treated as slaves, it should go for all sentient beings. That's the message that you want to end with, and that's the message you want to drive home at the end of that conversation. So, all right, now I'm going to hand it over to my wife, and she's going to talk about connecting with people.
Okay, so as outreach, we want to connect in a personal and emotional level with people. When we do that, they're more likely to listen and to open up and actually tell us what they're thinking. So a few ways we can do this. The first one is I used to be in the same boat. So you can tell them I understand how you feel. I used to eat meat. I see where you're coming from. And there's a simple way we can do this. We have 3 F's. It's feel, felt, and found. So, for example, if I have a person that tells me, oh, it's really great that you guys are doing this and you're saving so many animals, but I can never do it because I really love yogurt in the morning. So I can tell them, okay, I used to feel the same way. And I felt like if I went vegan, I would be really restricted and I wouldn't be able to eat all the foods I like. But I actually found that there are many substitutes for everything. Any meal you can think of, you can make it vegan. There are substitutes for ice cream and yogurt and chicken and beef or anything you want. So that's a really good way to kind of connect with them and let them know that you know how they feel. The next one is encourage. So for this one, we just want to show them how easy it is to make the change. You can actually use the inspire technique I talked about before. Just you can do it, we all did it. We are all alive, so why can't you? The next one is personal story. So outside of activism, I am a journalist, and I have learned that people's attention span is really, really small. And if you want to catch their attention and get them to be with you in that moment, you need to keep them engaged in the conversation. People forget facts, but they will remember stories. So that's why on the news, we always try to tell stories and people listen to that. So one way you can do that is telling them your own story. So for example, I would say, I went vegetarian first for health and for fitness. But then I started researching and I realized that there was more to animal agriculture than only the way I looked if I didn't have those animals. So I went vegan and it became something bigger than myself, and I realized that I could help a lot more by not eating animals and by teaching other people. And even if they are talking to you and they're not agreeing with you there, they might not because they don't want you to be right. But once they walk away, they might think about your story and just be like, well, this girl told me she researched and she felt great and she made a change. So maybe I want to watch a documentary, or maybe I want to Google something. And that's how we plant seeds on people. The next one is just be aware of who your audience is. If you're talking to a business person, you don't want to talk to them the same way you would talk to a 13-year-old. If you have a kid, you might be more relaxed and cool and just be on their level. Don't make them feel like they are being lectured by you. But if you have a business person or a professor, you might want to bring up your facts and your studies and everything you know that they will resonate with. The next one is speak from your heart. So as Kate said at the beginning, if we're watching the video and they are really emotional and they feel the video, don't bring up facts when they are trying to feel something. So just let the conversation flow and tell them what you feel. And I think that's a really good way to connect with people if we just open up and let them feel whatever they're feeling. And the next one would be use we and us instead of you and I. We don't want to create a barrier between the bystanders and us. We don't want them to feel alienated, like, oh, you are the meat eaters and we are the vegans. We are the good people. We don't want that. So just use we are all the same. We might not agree with whatever you are choosing to do, but we're trying to teach you what we know. So that way people are more likely to listen to us. Now I'm going to pass it on to Kate. She's going to talk about Socratic questioning.
The first thing I want to talk about with Socratic questioning is Socrates. Socrates is why we have the term Socratic questioning. He was the father of philosophy. He used to walk around in Athens and ask people questions in order to get to the essence of what they were talking about. Because he knew that we have this innate knowledge, and if you teach people to ask themselves questions, they can get deeper and deeper into what they really think about things. In that way, we are all like Socrates. We like to talk to people and ask them questions so that they can question what they really believe. And how do we know that this works? Because if you take a person and you put them in a room with a pig and a knife and tell them to kill the pig, how many of you guys think that the person would actually kill the pig? Most likely that person is not going to kill him. And then on the flip side, if you take a person and put him in a room with a pig and somebody beating the pig, most likely they're going to stop the person from beating the pig. So we know that this is innate knowledge. It's a powerful knowledge that we have had society tell us we should ignore. Society has told us what to think and fed us what to feel. And basically what we're trying to do with people is say, is this really what you think though? Is this really how you feel though? So back to Socrates. So Socrates was put on trial because in Athens they said, you have been perverting the minds of the young, and they threatened his life for it. But then they told him, we won't kill you if you stop dialoguing with people. To that he said, no, I would rather die than stop dialoguing. And that's really powerful. I feel like all of us have that feeling like this is what we're going to dedicate our lives to. We want to ask people questions because we want to save these animals. So like I said, everybody has innate knowledge. And what we're doing is taking that innate knowledge that they have deep inside of them and bringing it out. But the problem with a lot of conversations is that, especially in Massachusetts, massholes, we tend to argue with each other. We go into a conversation like we're gladiators, like one person has to win. And I'm sure that this is, like, for me, I've made that mistake too in some like outreach types of relations. But what you have to realize is that's not dialogue. Dialogue is working like a team and being inspired by what the other person has to say and just appreciating them for being there and asking them questions and letting them ask questions back and basically using that as a tool. If you don't agree with what they're saying, that's an awesome tool. Figure out why you don't agree and ask a question about why you don't agree, and how if they disagree with you, let them ask questions about why they disagree with you to figure out for themselves why they disagree. So that ties into what we were talking about earlier about trust. So in the process of asking these questions, that dialogue isn't even going to occur if people can't trust each other. And I think that you guys may feel that that's something that is a big issue today. People don't really have a lot of good dialogue because they're afraid that that other person is going to immediately just want to win, immediately say whatever to win and hurt the other person's feelings. And that's why it's so important that when we start these conversations, we make it apparent that they can trust us, that they can feel whatever they need to feel, and we're not going to attack them for it. So what are some ways we can actually ask these questions? Most important part, right? So instead of saying there is no humane way to kill an animal, you could say, do you think there's a humane way to kill an animal? Or you could even ask, what is the definition of humane? Which is, by the way, benevolence and compassion. Instead of saying we can get all of our nutrients from plants and be healthy, you could say, did you know we can get all of our nutrients from plants? Or you could say, are there any nutrients that we cannot get from plants? The answer is no. Instead of saying it is wrong to kill animals when we have no reason to kill them, you could say, if we don't need animals to survive, to live, how can we justify an animal that killing an animal that doesn't want to die? So basically, as you can see, try to consciously think as you're talking to them, anything that you want to say to them, see if you can turn it into a question, because that turns into open dialogue, that turns into open communication where they have to think about what to say instead of saying yes or no. And that's how you can open that system of communication. Does anybody have any questions on Socratic questioning? So I'm going to give it to Maria to finish us off with the staircase.
Okay, so this is the last part of the workshop. The staircase basically summarizes everything we've been talking about through the workshop. So Paul Bashir actually says that when we follow the staircase, if we miss one of the steps, actually the whole thing can fall apart. So it's really important that we keep in mind these steps and try to follow them as much as we can. So the first one is build rapport. So we want to build trust with these people. And for that, we can actually use the Socratic questioning he talked about. We can use body language, mirroring, all those things we talked about at the beginning. Then the second step in the staircase is need. So once we ask the questions, we start figuring out what their concerns are, what their needs are, what their trigger points are. And then from there, we can start giving information based on what they are telling us. The third step in the staircase is to find a solution. Find a solution for whatever they're telling you. So give them information. If they're worried about health, maybe suggest How Not to Die, the book. They can read about health and nutrition. If they're worried about the animals, maybe suggest a documentary, or the environment, you can suggest the research or another documentary. So just simple things that we can come up with to give them more information and send them on their way with something to take away from the conversation. And then the last one is close. We want to make sure that we close in a really good way. And as Kate said at the beginning, we can close with a good handshake. If people will give you a handshake, some people just don't want you to get close. So just say, okay, thank you for your time. It was really nice talking to you. I enjoyed the conversation, even if you didn't. But just try to send them on their way with a positive attitude. Keep in mind that most of these people maybe don't know other vegans, and we are the first vegans they're meeting. So we don't want to send them with a bad impression of all vegans are going to fight us and they think we're bad people. We want them to realize that we don't think they're bad people. We are just showing them the reality of the animal industry. So does anyone have any questions on the staircase?
Cool. All right, thank you guys all for listening. I hope that maybe it could help you in some way. So that wraps it up. Bye.